Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to learn about the 1857 revolt. What were the causes of the revolt? What are the reasons for the failure of the revolt? And later we will also be learning about the viewpoints of the historians, the observations made by the historians. If you still not have subscribed to my channel, please consider subscription. Let us start learning. The kings seen their power deteriorating. After the Britishers had gained control over the Indian territories, the Indian local kings started to see their power getting slowly reduced, gradually reduced. The residents were appointed in many states, and the kings were not allowed to keep their army. As you can see here, as the statement says that residents were appointed. As an observers, the British officers were appointed in many of the Indian local kingdoms, where they were also told that you are not supposed to keep your own army. Most of them lost their territories. Many kings and queens tried to negotiate with the company in order to safeguard their interest. Example, Queen Lakshmi Bai wanted the company to recognize her adopted son as a legal heir after her husband's death. Similarly, Nana Sahib, the adopted son of Peshwa Bajirao II, pleaded that he should receive his father's pension as he was his legal heir. But the Britishers never accepted this, as they were sure of their power. So as a situation you can observe here, mid 18th century onwards, the Indian kings had seen their power deteriorating, gradually getting reduced. They appointed residents in the many of the Indian local kingdoms, and the local kings were not allowed to maintain their own army. Slowly they started to gain control over the local Indian kingdoms. When the kings and the queen tried to negotiate with the company, they put them aside. Example, Queen Lakshmi Bai wanted the company to recognize her adopted son as the legal heir after her husband's death, which they said no. And Nana Sahib, the adopted son of Peshwa Baji Rao II, pleaded that he should receive his father's pension as he was his legal heir. Even this was not accepted by the Britishers because they were very confident that they will be able to defeat any Indian king. Why did the Britishers get this confidence? Because they were able to defeat the Battle of Buxar. Siraj-ud-Dawla, Indian king, in 1757, Robert Clive managed to defeat them. Similarly, in 1764, they were able to defeat the Indian kings in Battle of Buxar. This made them become more confident, and that confidence made them to be clear that they will be able to defeat any Indian king who did not accept their terms and conditions. So let us see what happened next. Awadh, as you can see on the screen, the area that was the last territory to be annexed in 1801. Britishers imposed subsidiary alliance there. What is subsidiary alliance? Subsidiary alliance means you will be given an army to safeguard your territory by the Britishers. So Britishers will provide security for you. You cannot have your own army. In return, you have to pay for the soldiers and for the company because they are providing security for you. Because they are providing security for the kingdom. If you fail to pay the money to the armed forces or to the company for their maintenance, the company would take over your territory slowly, or parts of your territory will be annexed to the company's control. So like that, the subsidiary alliance has been imposed in Awadh. In 1856, they took over it on the pretext of misgovernance of the territory. This was done by Lord Dalhousie. So the company even tried to deteriorate the authority of the Mughals. They stopped minting the coins on the Mughal king's name. In 1849, General Dalhousie announced the successor of Bahadur Shah will not stay in the Red Fort, and in 1856, Governor General Canning declared that Mughal kingdom had come to an end with the death of Bahadur Shah, and his successors would be known as prince, not king. As you can see here, the territory of Awadh was annexed in 1801. The Britishers imposed here subsidiary alliance. That is, they will provide you army, you have to pay for the army and their maintenance. In case if you fail to pay, your parts of your territory will be annexed to the Britishers' control or the East India Company's control. In 1856, they took over the entire control of Awadh on the charges of misgovernance of the territory by Lord Dalhousie. Not only this, they also tried to deteriorate the authority of the Mughals. They stopped minting the coins on the name of Mughal kings, where the Mughal kings' names were removed from the minted coins. And they also declared that after Bahadur Shah, the successors will not be living or staying in Red Fort. And once Bahadur Shah dies, the successors would not be known as the kings but only as the princes. Means officially they don't want to recognize anybody as a Mughal emperor any further. So slowly Britishers started to take control of the entire region of India. So the key members or the officers who played a key role in this process is Lord Dalhousie and Governor General Canning. The peasants and sepoy. In the countryside, in the villages side, the peasants and the zamindars, burdened with the heavy taxes and the rent levied on them. So on the villages side, where they have introduced a new system, they asked them to pay heavy taxes and rents. So they could not pay it. When they failed to pay their loans to their money lenders, they were forced to give away the ownership on the rights of their lands. When they failed, when the countryside peasants and sepoys failed to pay the loans which they have taken from the local money lenders, the money lenders used to force them to give away the rights or the lands. Like that, they lost their lands. They were overburdened by the taxes, and the methods of collecting the taxes were very harsh. You have to compulsorily pay the tax which is dictated by the company. The Indian sepoys were also unhappy, not only with the taxation system, not only with the harsh treatment, but also about their salaries, allowances, and the conditions of service. They used to get very less salaries when they are compared to their counterparts. There are no much allowances and no better conditions of services for them. Some of the new rules were also against their religious sentiments. Their religious sentiments are hurt with the new policies which are brought by the company. For example, in those days, people feared to cross the sea. They had a myth of losing their religion if they have crossed the seas. So, when in 1824, they were asked to cross the sea and go to Burma, they simply rejected it. Though the sepoys were ready to go there by land route, but they were severely punished as an issue remained unsolved. In 1856, the company passed a new law that every Indian who wanted to be a part of the army had to agree to serve overseas. So we can see here very clearly, the company is not ready to listen to any excuses what they have dictated. They want their orders to be followed. They want them to follow whatever is given to them as an order or a dictate. Even the religious sentiments are hurt, Even their emotions are hurt, whatever might be the reason, the company is not ready to listen, and they brought a new law making compulsory for every Indian who wanted to be a part of the army should agree to serve overseas, no matter what religious sentiments are getting hurt. So the peasants and the sepoys were also unhappy with the Britishers' rule. And you can see here, the sepoys were also against the British behavior with the peasants, as many of them were from the families of the peasants. Though the soldiers are working in the army of the British, they also come from the peasants' family. The Britishers or the East India Company forgot that these people also belong to that peasant families only. But when the peasants are treated harshly, the soldiers also got angry. This is one of the reasons why the revolt spread so fast. What is the response to the reforms which the Britishers have brought? Britishers started changing the society of India. They prohibited sati and encouraged widow remarriage system. But the Indians thought that the Britishers are involving in the Indian religious matters. They wanted the sepoys to serve overseas. They want the sati system to be stopped and encourage the widows to get remarried, which were not happy at all. And after, in 1830, it became easier for the Christian missionaries to own lands in India. In 1850, a new law was passed. So even if you are converting yourself into Christianity from Hinduism, still you get all your rights as usual as you are as a Hindu. So that does not disturb your inherent ability or rights to get the ancestral property. Many Indians started to believe that Britishers were trying to destroy their religion, culture, and custom. Because if you look at the series of the steps which are taken by the Britishers from the Indians' point of view, if you look at them, they are trying to break down all the clutches of the Indian religions. They want to disturb the religious sentiments. They want to convert them into another religion. They want to get their culture to be changed. So that's why many Indians started to believe that Britishers were trying to destroy their religion, culture, and customs. A mutiny becomes a popular rebellion. Mutiny means a group of soldiers resisting the order of the captain or a commander, which was within a small group. How did a small mutiny become a popular rebellion? A very large number of Indians developed a feeling that they had a common enemy and they should rebel against them. Who is that common enemy? None other than the company. Such a situation was experienced in North India during 1857. The company faced a massive rebellion in 1857 May when the sepoys mutinied against East India Company. It is started as one of the biggest armed resistance to colonialism in the 19th century anywhere in the world. So how did the situations become so wide? Initially, it started with a small soldiers group. How did it reach to the large number of crowd? Let us learn about that. From Meerut to Delhi, on 29th of March 1857, a soldier named Mangal Pandey was hanged to death after attacking his officers in Barakpur. It was an incident which happened on 29th of March 1857. Mangal Pandey was a soldier in the regiment where he resisted that he will not use the cartridge, where there are rumors about the cartridge that is being greased by the fat of pig and cow. For Hindus, cow is a holy animal, while coming to Islam followers, pig is not considered as a good or favorable animal for them. They don't like pig. So when these kind of rumors spread, Mangal Pandey, one of the soldiers in the regiment, registered his anger. He said he will not use that. He refused to use it. So when he refused and he attacked the officer, he was hanged to death. And some of the people who supported Mangal Pandey on this incident, who refused to use, they were also dismissed. And on 9th of May, they were sentenced to 10 years in jail for disobeying their officers. Mangal Pandey is hanged, and the other soldiers who supported or who refused to use these cartridges were dismissed, and 85 sepoys were dismissed and they were sentenced to 10 years of jail. The reason is they disobeyed to their officers. On 10th of May, the soldiers marched to the Meerut jail and released all the imprisoned sepoys. The other soldiers of the same regiments, other than these 85 members who were imprisoned, the other soldiers went, attacked the Meerut jail and released all the imprisoned sepoys. In this process, they attacked and killed the British officers and declared a war against the Ferengis, the white men or the company's soldiers. After doing this, releasing them in the Meerut jail, they reached to Delhi, where they joined hands with the regiment of Delhi. So the regiment of Delhi also joined with the regiment of Meerut. So now, not only in Meerut, there is a rebellion in Delhi as well. They rose in a rebellion and killed British officers and also captured the arms in Delhi. After this, they set the building on fire. So not only in Meerut, even in Delhi, the British officers were killed and they took arms into their control and destroyed the building. The sepoys then gathered at Red Fort and proclaimed Bahadur Shah Jafar as their leader, as you can see him on the screen left hand side. So from Meerut and from Delhi, the soldiers have gathered and went to Red Fort and proclaimed Bahadur Shah Jafar as their leader. Initially, the aging emperor was not ready to be a part of this rebellion, was not willing to take this, but finally he accepted this and wrote a letter to various kings, Indian local kings, to organize a group, a confederacy of Indian states to fight the British. Let us all come together and fight the British. As we know that many of the rulers controlled different territories on behalf of the Mughals and were threatened of losing their territories to the Britishers. So they all joined hands with Bahadur Shah Jafar in this moment when he requested them to come and join. Britishers have never expected this, as they thought that cartridge issue would die down soon. Britishers never expected that a small cartridge would bring an issue where the Mughal emperor will get involved and he would form a confederacy of Indian states, and all the Indian local states kings would come together and form as a group and fight with the company. This was beyond their imagination. They thought the cartridge issue would sideline within few days. This was an unexpected turn for the Britishers. So let us see how did the Britishers react to this. The rebellion spread. As you can see on the map, it spread from Meerut, then to Delhi, Bareilly, Lucknow, Faisalabad, Kanpur, Jhansi. So along with the local leaders and zamindars, many people rose up against the Britishers. It is not only the leaders, it is not only the Nawabs, it is not only the soldiers, the local people also rebelled against the Britishers. Nana Sahib, the adopted son of Peshwa Bajirao, gathered certain forces and declared himself as governor under Bahadur Shah Zafar. And Birjis Qadar of Lucknow, who was the son of deposed Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, proclaimed himself as a new Nawab. And his mother, Begum Hazrat Mahal, took an active part in the revolt uprising against the British. In Jhansi, as we all know, Rani Lakshmibai joined the rebel sepoys and fought with the British along with Tantia Top, the general of Nana Sahib. Like this, the rebellion did not get confined only to the Meerut region where a regiment of soldiers have revolted. Now it has spread to Delhi, it has spread to Bareilly, it has spread even to Lucknow, Jhansi, Faizabad and Kanpur. It started to spread to various areas across India. So Rani Avanti Bai, you can see on the screen on the right hand side, raised an arm of 4,000 against the Britishers who had taken over the administration of her state. So now we also have Rani Avanti Bai Lodi also joining the battle against the Britishers. The British were greatly affected by these rebels. They thought the issue of cartridge is very small, but now it has become a very larger issue. Not only the Nawabs, the rulers, now a new leader came up such as Ahmadullah Shah, a Maulvi from Faizabad, raised a huge force of supporters and fought against the Britishers in Lucknow. We can also see Bakht Khan, a soldier of Bareilly, and Kunwar Singh of Bihar were some of the such fighters who fought against the Britishers. So initially it started in Meerut, then it spread to Delhi, Bareilly. Now we can see Rani Avanti Lodi, and we can see Abdullah Shah, a Maulvi, a religious guru of Islam, fought against the Britishers in Faizabad, then soldiers in Bihar, then in Kanpur. So now what will the company do? The company has to fight back. There is no option left. The company could not expect this or anticipate this, but once it has broke down, there is no choice left other than fighting back. So the company fights back. Now the company wanted to suppress and repress the revolt completely. They don't want to spare anybody. So it brought reinforcements from England. It brought extra soldiers, extra arms, passed new laws to convict the rebels easily. Delhi was recaptured by the British in September 1857. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah, and his wife, Begum Jannat Mahal, were sent to prison in Rangoon in October 1858. So after capturing Delhi, they have thrown out the Mughal emperors out of Red Fort and they have imprisoned him in Rangoon in October 1858, where Bahadur Shah died in November 1862. The British had to fight for 2 years completely to suppress the massive rebellion at different places in India. Now the company started to fight back. It got its extra reinforcements from England. It started to make new laws which will make them easy to convict the rebellions. And they finally gained control over Delhi, and the Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah and his wife Begum Jannat Mahal were imprisoned in Rangoon in October 1858. In November 1862, Bahadur Shah Zafar died in Rangoon jail. So British had to fight for 2 years to completely suppress the massive rebellion. So Lucknow was taken in March 1858 and Rani Lakshmi Bai was defeated and killed in June 1858. Tantia Top managed to escape to the jungles and gathered tribal and peasants to fight, but later on he was captured, tried and killed in April 1859. Later on, British were able to gain back the control over the lost places and tried to win back loyalty of the people. For this, they have announced rewards to the loyal landholders with the traditional rights over their lands. Those who have rebelled were taught that if they submit to British, they would not have killed white people, they would remain safe. But many of them were tried and hanged, which included the sepoys, rebels, nawabs and rajas. So even the Britishers promised that they will not kill them. Still, once they surrendered, they tried and hanged them and they killed them. This included the list of sepoys, rebels, nawabs and rajas. After a month, Once the 1857 revolt came to an end, the British regained the power once again. But this time they changed some of their policies, and some of them are as follows. You can see on the screen the British Parliament passed a new act in the year 1858 which transferred the power to the crown from East India Company, which marks the end of the company rule in India in 1858 officially and made India a classic colony of the Britain crown. A Secretary of State of India was appointed for the governance of India, and he was given a council to advise him, and a Governor General was known as a Viceroy of India. All the rulers were assured that their territories would not be taken away from them and they could pass their kingdom to their heirs, their adopted heirs as well, but with a condition of accepting the supremacy of the British Queen. She is the British Queen at that point of time. So this is the British Parliament. Right now the picture is, so they have passed a new law which ended the rule of the company over Indian land, and India became a classic colony of the Britain crown directly after 1858. That is one major change which happened. The second change, they have appointed a Secretary of State which will be advised by a council, and the Governor General was also given as an assistant known as Viceroy of India. And even the Indian local kings were assured that their kingdoms will not be taken away. They can pass on their kingdoms to their heirs, the adopted heirs as well. And the only condition they have to accept is the supremacy of the British Queen. These are few changes which came after 1857 revolt. It was also decided that the ratio of the Indian soldiers in the British army to be reduced and more British soldiers to be brought so that there should not be any such revolt again. So looking at a foresighted nature, they decided that the Indian soldiers will be reduced. We will add more British soldiers. Now the soldiers of Bihar, Awadh, Central India were not recruited because those were the areas where the rebellion or the revolt took place. They started to recruit Gurkhas, Sikhs and Pathans who were considered for this job. The land and the property of the Muslims were taken away as Britishers were suspicious of them. They thought they will rebel in future as well. So they were made responsible for the rebellion. The Britishers started respecting the culture and the customs of India after the revolt. Policies were made for zamindars and the landlords which gave them security over their lands, and just a new phase of history that started after the 1857 revolt. What was the background of this? A significant part of the British rule over India has transformed the ruling system of Britain in India. There is no other event that contributed greater in terms of Britain's changing policies. From 1757, the East India Company established a strong colonial footing in India. But during this time, the East India Company was involved in the visible aspects of colonialism, and the exploitation greatly hampered the prospects of Indians in terms of social, political, and economic military scenario of India. Thus, exploration carried out by the East India Company in 100 years found reactions in various revolts. But the scale of the revolt of 1857 was much larger and unprecedented by the company. This revolt prompted the British Parliament to take direct control over the Indian land. What are the causes of the revolt? Now let us get to analyze what are the causes of the revolt. There are mainly 5 causes: social, economical, political, military, and immediate factors. Political factors, as we can see here, due to the Britishers' expansionist policies, most of the Rajas, Nawabs, and Zamindars were either disposed from their state or became subsidiary to the British, who were the local Nawabs, were became as an assistants to the Britishers, or sometimes they lost their kingdoms. You can see few of them on the screen. The East India Company had a planned way of expansion, and many Indian states easily fell into the strategy which the company has used. The policy of trade and commerce subjugated the states. Indirect subordination, subsidiary alliance, policy of war, policy of annexation, policy of direct subordination, policy of misgovernance. These were the few policies or the strategies which are used by the Britishers to subdue the Indian kings. These policies greatly hampered the interests of the rulers of the native states, and they one by one became the victims of this British expansionism. Therefore, those rulers who lost their states to the British were naturally against the British and took sides against them during the revolt. However, some of the rulers were inactive, convinced, and collaborated with the British in suppressing the revolt. So, the underlining point here is the Britishers did not do the expansion policy in one day. They had different strategies, different policies, and through that they tried to annex the Indian territories. To name them: subsidiary alliance, policy of misgovernance, doctrine of lapse, policy of war, etc. So they have used different strategies to subdue the Indians. These were the political factors for 1857 revolt. During the period of Dalhousie is marked as major factor of revolt in 1857. A famous policy was brought under his period, doctrine of lapse. Many states like Satara, Jaipur, Sambalpur, Jhansi were captured and captivated. The British expanded recklessly. Now, what is this policy of doctrine of lapse? If you do not have a naturally born son, if you adopt a son, that is not valid. You should have a naturally born boy baby, then only you will have your kingdom for you. Otherwise, your kingdom will be taken over by the Britishers because your kingdom gets lapsed. This is called doctrine of lapse. Thus, the political factors, that is, expansionary policy of the British, greatly contributed towards the revolt of 1857. The other factors was that the Indian judges were not allowed to try the criminal cases of Europeans, and thus it showed the discriminatory nature of the Britishers at all levels. Economic factors. This was a vital factor as it affected a large number of sections of Indian society. Ever since the grant of Diwani was made to the British in 1765, or the Company of East India, the land revenue became an issue of much burden for the Indians. British's government had imposed pocket area transformation. That means introduction of permanent settlement in Bengal, Mahalwari settlement in central India, Raitwari settlement in southern India. All these three settlements were highly exploitative in nature. They are having a devastating impact on the lives of the Indian farmers. They had high rates of land revenue, ruined the prospects of the Indian peasantry. Thus, the peasants were greatly encouraged to overthrow the British government from India. The drain of wealth impoverished peasants and thus participated actively in the revolt of 1857. These are the economic factors. The racial discrimination. The racial discrimination was a prime factor where the Indians have suffered a lot due to their visible racial exploitation, where Indians were not allowed to mix with the Europeans. There was discrimination that was carried out in public places. This generated a lot of anger among the Indians against the whites in India. The Britishers were also circumspect about interfering in the religious and cultural affairs in India. They try to disturb the cultural and the religious sentiments of Indians. Until 1800, the British were thus not keen to interfere in social and religious affairs. But the beginning of the 19th century, the British began to support and bid for social reforms by the methods of legislations. This also made Indians to become very aggressive towards the revolt and support the forces against the British. You can see here, thus it can be summarized that Indians began to doubt the objective of the British since the advent of these legislations, which gave some glaring examples of that period, the area around the 1813 Charter Act, which made the conservative Indians viewed as an imposition of Christianity over them. They also made rules which will make conversions very easy. And you can see at the same time, there were certain social legislations which were passed, like the abolition of sati, 1829, passed by Lord William Bentinck, prohibition of the child marriage, widow remarriages, were all understood by the Indians as to impose Christianity over them. They want to disturb the Indian cultural setup. Therefore, in the first half of the 19th century, the British proposal of social reforms through the means of legislation, although it was directed towards the acceptability of the British rule over India, conservative sections viewed this as an imposition of Christianity over the Indian sections, because they are disturbing every cultural aspect of India. Military causes. The Indian military was not a professional military. They were just peasants in uniform. We need to remember that. Every impact on peasantry had a large repercussions in the form of military discontent, because they all belong to peasant families. So the policies followed by Lord Dalhousie and Lord Canning greatly hurt the sentiments of Indian military. The Indian military was also already having largely discriminated in terms of their salaries, pensions, promotions. Indians were subjugated in the military, while their European counterparts faced no such discriminations. So Indian military is not a professional military. They were actually the peasants in the uniform. So if the peasants are not treated well, the impact is also felt on the military who are in the military uniform. So the policies which are made by Dalhousie and Canning greatly affected the sentiments of the Indian military. And they were also discriminated on a larger extent in terms of salaries, pensions and promotions. So these all also added fuel to the revolt. The British, during the time of Lord Canning, two important laws were passed. One is, on the eve of the revolt, General Service Enlistment Act. This act meant that if any military personnel were posted abroad, they would not be entitled to get extra allowances. This act was just a jolt to the prospects to the Indian military personnel serving under the East India Company. So during the Lord Canning, the important bills which were passed, the other one was Religious Disabilities Act. For Indian soldiers, the belief that to be crossed an ocean, they would lose their religion, but they would thus be socially orchestrated. The Hindu soldiers skipped appointments that involved serving in the foreign land. But after passing the Religious Disabilities Act, they would have to take the appointment compulsory. Otherwise, they would lose their job. At the same time, the use of religious symbols in the military was also restricted completely. So, they have to serve the English people. They have to serve in the foreign lands as well. If the appointment is given, they cannot reject. These are two important laws which also added fuel for the revolt. the most important one. The pattern of 1853 Enfield rifle musket, the immediate factor for the 1857 revolt. The immediate factor was the introduction of the Enfield rifle. It was said that the cartridge of the rifle was wrapped in a fat of cow and pig. You can see the sheet on the screen here. The sheet is wrapped with the fat of cow and pig. The cartridge had to be bitten off before loading into the gun. So the Hindus and the Muslim soldiers were reluctant to use this Enfield rifle. At Barakpur in Bengal, the soldiers of the 34th Native Infantry refused to obey the commander, Lieutenant B. Og Mangal Pandey, who led the uprising, wanted to kill Lieutenant Bog, and finally Mangal Pandey has overpowered and he was hanged. He was the first rebellion who was hanged in the revolt of 1857. This hanging of Mangal Pandey has sparked out a collective uprising in the form of the revolt in 1850. After the event of Barakpur on 10th of May 1857, General Bakht Khan, who was posted in Meerut along with the contingents of troops from Meerut and Bareilly, marched to Delhi, and in this context of revolt was set. They declared Bahadur Shah Zafar as the leader of the revolt. So on 10th of May 1857, the revolt began its own state and set to fire. After initial reluctance, Bahadur Shah Zafar agreed to become the leader of the revolt. General Bakht Khan raised Bahadur Shah Zafar as the leader of the revolt, as the people of India still accepted Mughal suzerainty over India, and it was the symbolic for him to lead this revolt. So after 10th of May, the revolt spread to different parts of India: Delhi, Jhansi, Kanpur, Lucknow, Bareilly, Awadh, Assam, Bihar, etc. So the various parts of North India were under the grip of the revolt. Thus, from 1857 to 1858, the British were on a war footing to suppress the revolt. Thus, revolt was suppressed by 1858. Revolt of 1857, observations made by the historians. R.C. Mujamdar's observations on the revolt of 1857. R.C. Mujamdar tried to summarize the revolt in a different way. According to him, the revolt was neither the first, nor was it national, nor was it a war of independence. He had a different viewpoint. In fact, he made a significant observation that this revolt was not the first, and there was a tradition of revolts with the onset of the British occupation in India. Sometimes these revolts were peasant revolts, sometimes it took from the tribal uprising, civil uprising, and sometimes even the military revolted. For example, Vellore Mutiny in 1806, which was a glaring example of discontentment. Revolts were not entirely against the British alone. They were also against the collaborations of the British rule. There are few great observations which are made by him. In the 100 years of East India Company, there were many revolts. According to Mujamdar, the revolt was not national, as the context of nationalism was not present at that time. Yes, there was no concept of nationalism only at that point of time. After the disintegration of the Mughal Empire, India was divided into geographical expression with a regional ruling system and regional sentiments. The revolt spread in 1847 was confined to northern India only. South, east, western parts of India were not actively involved in the revolt. Even in northern India, some of the strong ruling houses actively participated in suppressing the revolt, not against the revolt. There were many classes, including the military class intelligentsia, who were not in favor of the revolt. So therefore, one cannot say that it was a national revolt. Also, India was a divided geographical expression with various incumbents, ruling houses, and that had control over various units of the state. Therefore, there was not any feeling of nationalism in the modern context of the expression. These were the observations made by R.C. Mujumdar on the revolt of 1857. S.N. Sen's observations of revolt 1857. He was of opinion that it was nothing but a military revolt. S.N. Sen called the revolt as a Sepoy Mutiny. He was of the opinion that it was mainly the outburst in the military, with certain other groups also started participating. While the observations made by the British historians, Recy observed the revolt was a war against Christianity, but the statement of Recy had certain strict reservations, like Christianity as such was not targeted during the revolt, even though some of the conservative sections of India were against the imposition of Christianity over them. Outram observed that the revolt was a Muslim conspiracy to overthrow the British from India. In fact, the empire of the East India Company developed on the ruins of the Mughal Empire, and the involvement of Bahadur Shah Zafar as a leader of the revolt was only a symbolic of all India sovereignty, and he did not have any concrete participation in the revolt. In fact, he was immediately arrested and sent to Rangoon. So Outram's view that Muslims wanted to bounce back into the ruling system and thus conspired against the British rule is definitely not a valid ground of expression. Different viewpoints. And R. Holmes said that it was a revolt of clash of civilizations and barbarians. Benjamin Disraeli described it as national revolt. But Lawrence and Sellis have come up with coherence with the Indian viewpoint, especially with S.N. saying that it was a military revolt in the real sense. So, therefore, out of many viewpoints that we see, Indian historians and the British historians had different contexts of expression of their opinions. What are the causes for the failure of 1857 revolt? The revolt was eventually not successful in ousting the British from the country because of several factors. You can see the mind map as well. One, the sepoys lacked on a clear leadership. There were several leaders. There is also did not have any coherent plan by which the foreigners could be routed. Indian rulers who aided the revolt did not envision any plan for the country after the British were defeated. They don't have any plan. Majorly, only North Indians were affected by this revolt. The three presidencies of Bombay and Madras remained mostly unaffected. The Sikh soldiers also did not take part in the rebellion. So, there is no unity, lack of strong leadership, not properly organized, feudal in nature. Britishers had better resources than the Indian kings. Everyone was fighting for their own interest. These are the few reasons for the failure of the revolt of 1857. So in this video lecture, we learned what was the reaction of the Nawabs, Sepoys, then the normal kings. How did they fight against the Britishers? Due to political factors, military factors, immediate cause, economic causes, etc. And we also discussed the different viewpoints of the historians as well as the causes for the failure of the 1857 revolt. Hope you all understood. Please stay tuned and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.